consider the Department of Education's use of federal funds in the second round of the Education Stabilization Fund's Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief ESSER II, and in the third round of ESSER funds authorized under the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, ESSER ARP. Our first order of business is the approval of the October 21st, 2021 meeting minutes. Testifiers will have a 3-minute time limit. A chime will sound when you have 30 seconds left and a second chime when your testimony expires. I will now ask board staff to call on any testifiers who have signed up to provide oral testimony on the minutes.
Committee Chair Nama'u and Voss, there are no oral testifiers for this agenda item.
Mahalo, Gina. Any written testimony submitted before the deadline was publicly posted on the board's website. With public testimony on this item being concluded, we will move on to the discussion. If there are no revisions, can I get a motion and a second from SAC committee members to approve the minutes? Board Member Kaimana Bakarsi.
Move to approve the minutes of October 21st, 2021.
And Board Chair Payne.
Second the motion.
Okay, it has been moved by Board Member Bakarsi and seconded by Board Member Chair Payne. Because these minutes are from a joint committee meeting with the Finance and Infrastructure Committee, we also need a motion from the FIC Committee. So FIC Chair Voss, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair. On behalf of FIC, as this is a joint committee, can I please get a motion and a second from FIC committee members to approve the minutes? Board Member Lynn Fallon.
I move to approve the minutes.
Thank you. May I have a second to Committee Vice Chair Fallon's motion? Board Member Arakaki.
I second the motion.
Thank you, Board Member Arakaki. Chair Nama'u, it's been moved and seconded by FIC committee members. We are ready to proceed to a vote on the minutes.
Okay, thank you. I am giving you all a moment to put your hands up if you want to comment, or put your hands down if you're trying to move or second the motion. If there's no further discussion on objects, the minutes will be approved. And seeing no objections, the minutes are approved by unanimous consent. Thank you. Okay. Here we are for the real business of our day. We will now move on to the only action item on our agenda, which is action on the Department of Education's educational plan and fiscal plan to use federal funds in the second round of the Educational Stabilization Fund's Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief, ESSER II, and in the third round of ESSER funds authorized under the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, ESSER ARP, in accordance with the Board of Education's October 21st, 2021 ESSER II and ESSER ARP fund guidance. I will now ask board staff to call in any testifiers who have signed up to provide oral testimony on this agenda item.
Osa Tui, followed by Corey Rosenlee, Principal Justin Mew, Sherry Nakamura. Osa Tui, President, Hawaii State Teachers Association. Osa, can you hear me?
Aloha, Gina.
Aloha, you have 3 minutes. Please proceed.
Mahalo. Aloha, Board. The currently proposed plan states that teachers will be provided all types of training. But what priorities are being put aside to implement additional training? HSTA asks that you reinstate the 21 hours of job-embedded professional development. 21 hours will help with workforce stabilization, as you've read in written testimony, while also providing a targeted investment in the educators who are directly impacting students and student outcomes. At the conclusion of bargaining our current contract, the following was agreed to by the parties. quote, should alternate and appropriate funding become available to the department, the parties shall endeavor to reinstate the 21 hours. Teachers need to know that they are supported and equipped with the training they need to effectively address student needs during these difficult times. ESSER funds satisfy the, quote, alternate and appropriate funding clause, and we await the department and the board to, quote, endeavor to reinstate the 21 hours, as was agreed to. HSTA stands ready to negotiate in good faith on this issue. Minutes ago, I was informed of a letter put out by the U.S. Secretary of Education, Dr. Miguel Cardona, speaking about suggested uses of ESSER funding. Very briefly, in part, it stated, 1, increase educator and staff compensation. The most common reason educators have cited for leaving school employment in the last year is stress, followed by insufficient pay. Many school leaders are increasing wages by offering hiring and retention bonuses, working towards permanent salary increases, or providing premium pay that help educators receive the compensation they deserve and keep them in the profession. And we encourage others to continue to work towards increasing compensation. 2, build and maintain a cadre of high-quality substitute teachers. 3, support educator and staff well-being, including improved working conditions. Now more than ever, supporting educator well-being is critical for retaining our current educators and staff. As previously mentioned, stress is the most common reason educators have cited for leaving school employment in the last year, followed by insufficient pay. And his fourth point was to make investments in the educator pipeline. This is critically important in Hawaii to make sure that we don't lose more of our educators that we're losing already, and to have smaller paychecks really is a slap in the face to our teaching profession. So please do this. Please satisfy the agreements that we've made and look towards reinstating the 21 hours. Mahalo, Board, for continuing to question what is provided to you and ensuring that these funds do not go to waste. Aloha. Mele kalikimaka and hau'oli makahiki.
Corey Rosenlee, President Emeritus, Hawaii State Teachers Association, followed by Principal Justin Mew, Sherry Nakamura. Corey, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. You have 3 minutes. Please proceed.
Thank you. Chair Nama'u, Chair Voss, and board members, my name is Corey Rosenlee, and I'm a teacher at Campbell High. I am asking the board members to amend the DOE's fiscal plan using federal funds to include funding for the 21 hours, which could then subsequently be bargained with HSTA. The current DOE plan is a violation of the intent, if not the letter of the law, when it comes to ESSER funding. ESSER funding was designed to deal with both the COVID pandemic and the economic crisis that ensued. ESSER funding, as prescribed, was to avoid layoffs and pay decreases. But pay decreases have occurred for Hawaii's public school teachers. The DOE has ample funding from ESSER to rectify this problem, and the DOE's budget proposal should be amended. In June 2021, when HSTA members ratified their contract, they were under the impression that they would be getting a $2,200 retention bonus because the legislature, in a veto-proof majority, had passed that funding. The governor, supported by the Board of Education, vetoed that funding, which was not overridden by the legislature. The result being a loss to teacher pay and control of that funding to this board. The board then must take action to abide by the ESSER requirements and to reinstate the funding for the 21 hours, to be in compliance with the federal law, and to do the right thing for Hawaii's teachers. Thank you.
Principal Justin Mew, followed by Sherry Nakamura, Lisa Morrison, Lynn Otaguro. Principal Justin Mew, Henry J. Kaiser High School. Principal Mew, can you hear me?
Yes, can you all hear me?
Yes, you have 3 minutes. Please proceed.
Mahalo. Mahalo, board. Good morning to you. I've been a school principal since 2003 at all three levels, elementary, middle, and high, and 12 years as a state educational specialist, 8 years as a classroom teacher. So I know all of these balcony views, and I am from the perspective now as a 41-year educator, and of course, the balcony view of a high school principal. I am in full support of Superintendent Hayashi and his state leadership team for putting together the ESSER III plans. Therefore, I urge the Board of Education to approve the plans and release the funds as soon as possible. One half of our school year will be in the books tomorrow. And as you may know, with procurement standards of practice, there are time delays once we are ready to expend the funds. Time is running short. Principals had sufficient input into this ESSER III plan, myself included. The plan shows that Superintendent Hayashi is clearly in touch with school administrators in the field. While he is in the top leadership position, his heart is with us at the school level. Principals are taking the brunt of student learning loss and staff frustrations. For example, I have multiple students at Kaiser who are 3.8 students and now suffering from depression and anxiety, coming back to school finally after a year and a half. My staff shows signs of being overwhelmed and in need of social and emotional breaks, and their school and family life are being affected. So Superintendent Hayashi and his leadership plan gives us hope and help. There is heart built into this plan, and I more so support it. So in summary, I am in full support of the Hawaii Department of Education's ESSER III plan. I urge this board to approve the plan for full funding and release for immediate implementation. To the board, be well. Mahalo nui. Seshe. Tomo arigato. Gracias. This concludes my testimony.
Sherry Nakamura, followed by Lisa Morrison, Lynn Otaguro, Principal Fred Murphy. Sherry Nakamura, Hui for Excellent in Education Coalition, known as HEI. Sherry, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, you have 3 minutes. Please proceed.
Mahalo. Aloha chairs Nama'u and Voss and members of the committees. My name is Sherry Nakamura, Director of HEI Coalition. We would like to comment on action item 3A. We thank the DOE for meeting with HEI and incorporating some of our feedback into the plan. However, as our written testimony states, we are still not sure of what the direction is. What are the near-term and long-term goals? The DOE lists myriad strategies and supports, but it does not explain specifically how they connect and work to help our students. We looked at 3 other district plans and were impressed by the soundness of their planning process. First of all, stakeholder engagement happened early, in the spring, and the information was made transparent and informed their plans. Needs assessments were conducted, and corresponding strategies that were specific were identified. There were processes of accountability, some even using ESSER dollars to hire staff to monitor the effectiveness of the strategies employed. For equity and funding, one district used a weighted student formula, giving additional weights to our high-needs students and also providing a minimum dollar allocation to help smaller schools that were disadvantaged because of their enrollment. We hear from the field and see from testimony that schools are struggling with the effects of the pandemic, so it would be prudent for the BOE to approve funds that go to the schools. We support the approval of funds to be allocated to the school level. Thank you for this opportunity to testify.
Lisa Morrison, followed by Lynn Otaguro, Principal Fred Murphy, Susan Piccola Davis. Lisa Morrison, HSTA. Lisa. can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. You have 3 minutes. Please proceed.
Mahalo. Aloha, Chairs Nama'u and Voss and members of the committees. I'm an arts and communication teacher at Maui High School and the Secretary Treasurer for the Hawaii State Teachers Association. Having participated in the feedback sessions on the ESSER plan before you, I can best express my testimony today as disappointment that this does not provide the clear direction and meaningful support for schools that its executive summary says is necessary. Students hang out in my classroom even when they don't have class with me. And this morning they wonder why I look so troubled. So I shared the department's plan and asked for their thoughts. Their message on the real focus is clear. More teachers so they can have smaller class sizes with more attention. Tutoring support during school time from qualified people, especially in math, and better digital resources. Additionally, they said surveys on how they are feeling are useless and they want actual humans to talk to about their problems, which can't be identified unless they have access to enough counselors on campus at any time. Unfortunately, page 6 of the executive summary indicates this is not part of the department's plan, and it fails to provide additional support for students on coursework, personnel, to fill vacancies and expand staff and student support in mental well-being. My students are baffled as to why the department wouldn't get that these are the key to help mitigate the impacts of the pandemic and student achievement and well-being. I remain disappointed that the plan lacks specificity even after feedback pleading for clearer direction. The plan appears to push responsibility for planning down to the complex level without giving guidance on what schools are supposed to opt to do and how much programs cost. U.S. Secretary of Education Miguel Cardona issued a letter this morning that validates exactly what my own students are saying, and I quote, "Let us be clear, ARP provides vital resources to hire additional educators and school staff and to improve compensation to recruit and retain educators and school staff. The letter goes on and on about increasing compensation and providing for staff well-being. And what's sad is that staff well-being is exactly what was dropped from the draft plan before this one was finalized. I encourage you to look through that letter, and I ask on behalf of myself and my students that you require the department to address these needs in the plan before it's approved. Mahalo.
Lynn Otaguro, followed by Principal Fred Murphy. Susan Piccola Davis. Lynn Otaguro. Lynn, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. You have 3 minutes. Please proceed.
Aloha committee chairs and members. I am Lynn Otaguro, retired teacher and concerned community member. In addressing the use of ESSER monies, I agree with the questions raised by the He'e Coalition about the process for requesting and monitoring the use of funds. I agree with their asking, what is the purpose and objectives of the DOE's plan? If the ESSER funds are intended to help safely reopen and sustain safe operation of schools and address the impact of COVID-19 on our students, then emphasis should be placed on supporting health and safety measures. This should be addressed first because issues about the safety of our schools form the root causes of many of the other concerns schools are dealing with today. The DOE has taken steps to address COVID-19, but in many cases like COVID testing, the use of resources to improve or monitor ventilation, or the provision of PPE, more support is needed. The ESSER funds should be used to provide staffing and to follow up with schools to ensure full participation in and proper implementation of the DOE's health and safety measures. If we addressed health and safety, then consistent attendance might be more possible. Questions about staffing and safe work conditions might be less prevalent. Further, as the schools are the places that are dealing with the behavioral and academic issues, we should be using ESSER funds to shore up services there to support administrators, teachers, and staff. In this, it is more helpful to have funding for fundamental programs like the 21 hours of professional development that would both signal support to our teachers and give them time to work on issues tailored to their school needs. These kind of monies would be useful for programs like discussed by the Waianae Nanakuli complex today. I know that this board is concerned about student progress and welfare. particularly for those students with the greatest needs. And I am too. I worry about my kids and their families who have fallen out of the routines of schooling. High schoolers, but also little ones who need fundamental skills like my former first graders. Teachers and schools can work with students where they are and help them progress, but they need more help in the classroom and on campus. Thank you very much.
Principal Fred Murphy, followed by Susan Piccola Davis. Principal Fred Murphy, Mililani High School. Principal Murphy, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. You have 3 minutes. Please proceed.
Thank you. Aloha, board members. My name, of course, is Frederick Murphy, principal of Mililani High School. I'm speaking today in support of the Department of Education's plan for ESSER III funds. Let me also take this opportunity to speak in support of our interim superintendent, Mr. Keith Hayashi. His leadership has been good in this time. It's what we've needed. It's been assuring to work with a local educational expert that knows our people and our system. Interim Superintendent Hayashi has skillfully rallied Hawaii's Department of Education principals and key leaders to put this plan together. It's a sound plan. It's what's needed in our schools, and it needs to be implemented now. I'm an optimist, and I believe that we have truly learned a great deal from the experiences over the last year and a half. In fact, I like to tell the staff at Mililani High School that we are stronger, even more innovative, and equipped to connect with our people than we ever have been. We are headed towards a post-pandemic renaissance. I believe that the area of focus in the ESSER III educational plan will help us move towards addressing the problems caused by the pandemic, and more importantly, build schools that are even better in a post-pandemic world. Interim Superintendent Hayashi has the backing of his principals and has engaged our stakeholders through conversations that we've had with our school community councils. I'm looking forward to implementing the plans outlined for you in the Department of Education's Elementary and Secondary Schools Emergency Relief Plan. I urge you to approve the plan and the funds to our school communities where the expertise of your school leaders and the teams at each of your public schools can utilize these funds to make Hawaii's public schools an even better place for your students statewide. Mahalo for your time. I'm available to answer any questions if you have them.
Susan Piccola Davis. Susan, can you hear me?
Yes. Good morning. I
Good
think I
morning. You
3
have 3
minutes.
minutes. Please proceed.
My first point is I think it was a great job for all who participated in publishing this document. I will say that this makes it a lot easier for board members and the public to understand funds are going to use. It's a great start. I elect getting the funds to the schools as soon as possible and approval of the document with some of my comments and highlights that will follow. On page 8, I still want to point out that regardless of whether the students are high needs or non-high needs, those percentages are high when you add them together. So segregating these is not right. I'm going to focus on the financial plan on page 25, other education stabilization responses. Number 9, item 9, administrative costs and emergency needs. Why is this included in fiscal year 22-23? Because I thought we needed it now. Number 10, quarantine while traveling related expenses, $500,000, fiscal year 21 through 22. How did you come up with this amount? It's so inflated that I would love to know how you did the math, because this is way overboard. Contingency funds on item number 12 be allocated as determined by the superintendent. What would be included in these contingency funds? Cover more budget cuts? Look at the amount of money. 4 million, 4 million, 2.67 million, almost $11 million. Number 14, 2% over allocation factor totaling over $8 million in anticipation that not all approved uses will be fully expended. Plucked from air, okay? Page 23, health and safety. Healthy habits funding request. Why are we waiting for fiscal year 22 and 23? SEL, page 24. Can you please explain the enhanced management system and services? Page 24, accelerated learning. Number 14, why are we waiting for fiscal year 22-23 to come up with effective academic practices? I support the plan. I support the finances with my highlights and questions and concerns. Thank you.
Committee Chairs Namau and Voss. That concludes oral testimony.
Hello. With public testimony on this item being concluded, we will move on to the discussion. I would like to call on Interim Superintendent Keith Hayashi to provide the department's recommendation.
Good morning, Chair Namau, Chair Voss, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to present the department's ESSER educational plan and fiscal plan. Before we go into the presentation, I want to share my appreciation for all the stakeholders who attended the various sessions, the complex area superintendents, school principals, and leaders who gathered feedback through their school community council meetings, and the teachers and school teams that contributed thoughts and ideas to the creation of the revised educational plan. Thank you as well to our assistant superintendents and state office teams. The ESSER funds were designed to provide public education systems relief from the unexpected impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Since the onset of the pandemic, the department has faced significant budget shortfalls. As you recall, in fiscal year 2020, the department general fund budget was cut by $50 million. Last year, the general fund cut was increased to $100.2 million. The $100.2 million in cuts were maintained for the current fiscal year and next year with additional cuts, largely focused on converting our general funds to temporary federal funds. Today, we are fortunate to have Budget and Finance Director Craig Hirai here to provide an update on the state's financial outlook and Governor Ige's supplemental budget proposals for fiscal year 2022-2023. What Director Hirai will share will impact our use of ESSER funds. As more general funds are made available to restore the shortfalls, we can dedicate more ESSER funds to directly address the needs of our students and schools. Director Hirai. Board staff, can you please activate Director Hirai's microphone and video, please? Thank you very much.
Well, good morning, board members. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes,
We can
please
hear
proceed.
you.
Okay. I'm Craig Hirai, the Director of Finance, and with me is Neil Miyahira, my budget administrator. Let me share the administration's approach to the DOE's fiscal year 23 supplemental budget. Increased recurring general fund support for public schools is programmed into the state's financial plan, which will allow ESSER federal funding to be focused on learning loss. We reestablish predictable, reliable, and sustainable funding levels to support public schools. The state's economy and fiscal outlook have improved dramatically from this time last year. The economy has rebounded much faster from COVID-19 than predicted. The Council on Revenue, in its September 2021 forecast, projects strong tax revenue growth, 6.3% for fiscal year 22 and sustained growth of 4% for subsequent fiscal years. Tax revenue collections for the first 5 months of fiscal year 22 far exceed the Council on Revenue's projection 27.3% versus the 6.3% in the last council projection. This improved fiscal outlook and ESSER proportional funding MOE, maintenance of effort requirements, provide opportunity to increase BOE funding levels to fill past funding gaps that were exacerbated by COVID-19. And Mr. Miyahira and I are available if you have any questions.
Thank you, Director Hirai. To reiterate what Director Hirai just shared, with the anticipated restoration of our general fund budget, we will be able to focus the use of our ESSER funds on learning acceleration and supports for our students' academic and social-emotional needs. Our goal is to get students back on track to meet grade level expectations. The department is committed to prioritizing clear strategies to stabilize education. This is an opportunity to innovate and revitalize systems and processes to ensure greater alignment and statewide consistency. The ESSER educational plan incorporates stakeholder feedback and input with research-based practices. A systemic process was utilized to ensure feedback opportunities that were available to the community at large. 206 schools, representing 80% of Hawaii DOE schools, provided feedback from their school community councils, which include representatives of 6 stakeholder groups: school administration, teachers, classified staff, students, parents, and community members. In addition to the extensive school effort, the department also held various stakeholder feedback group sessions, including groups such as the Special Ed Advisory Council, SEAC, the State Student Council, Hawaii P20, We Are Oceania, Hawaii Education Liaison Officers Council, HEE, Keiki Caucus, Tasso Foundation, HGEA, HSTA, and UPW. The plan was posted on the department's website to allow the general public the opportunity to contribute their ideas for both the educational and fiscal plan. The links will remain open for future feedback as the plan and implementation continue to evolve. The development of our ESSER educational and fiscal plan was anchored by 4 core beliefs. Students, number 1, students are the focus of our decision making. Number 2, a systems approach is essential to implement strategies that support students and schools. Number 3, the implementation of effective strategies requires strong data systems and processes at all schools and at all levels. And number 4, strong leadership, accountability, and support at all levels are critical. In this plan, you will find a greater focus on strategies. The 3 focus areas have not changed: health and safety, social-emotional learning, and accelerated learning. The plan outlines 4 evidence-based strategies that incorporate research as well as the stakeholder feedback gathered. The 4 strategies are healthy habits, healthy schools, action-oriented data decision-making, responsive capacity building, and effective academic practices. Implementation of each strategy will include differentiated support to schools and complex areas as they work toward mitigating the impact of COVID and advancing education. Also included in the ESSER educational plan are 17 metrics to monitor, report, and answer specific inquiry questions across the 3 major focus areas, as well as ensure greater transparency and accountability. Every quarter, the data will be reviewed through the tri-level system. This ensures greater accuracy in our data reporting. Following the end of each quarter, The data will be publicly posted on the dashboard on our website for stakeholders to review. Section 2 is the fiscal plan, which includes information on specific federal requirements and the purpose of the funds. Funding for programs is based on need. The fiscal plan includes a summary of the categorical uses of ESSER funds and a breakdown of the proposed uses into subcategories. Much of the funds will be allocated to complex areas for direct school and student supports. The same factors that inform our weighted student formula are used to allocate funds to our complex areas to ensure equitable distribution. This includes more funding for students who need additional support. A larger financial picture must remain sustainable and realistic for future spending. Section 3 includes a link to the detailed expenditure report. The use of federal funds received by the department are reported monthly on our public website. On this website is a feedback form that allows the general public to submit feedback on our use of funds. This monthly report will be modified to align with the educational plan categories. The ESSER educational plan and fiscal plan are not static plans, but living documents that will adapt to the needs of our school communities and the changes in the educational landscape. As our student and school needs evolve, so will this plan. Regardless of the source of funds or the circumstances we find ourselves in, the department remains committed to providing our students with educational opportunities that will facilitate their success. Our students have been deeply impacted by the current pandemic, academically, socially, and emotionally, and the ESSER funds will help us to provide the appropriate supports and services they need to recover from this and grow. Thank you for this opportunity to share the plan briefly. Director Hirai, Deputy Superintendent Unibasami, and the Assistant Superintendents and I stand ready for questions. Thank you.
Mahalo, Interim Superintendent Hayashi. Thank you for your presentation and recommendation. Note that the SAC and FIC committees will each need to individually vote on motions made, and only committee members can move and second motions for their respective committees. I will call for the vote for SAC, and FIC Chairperson Voss will call for the vote for FIC. Members who sit on both committees will vote twice. A motion will need to be passed by both committees to be included in a recommendation to the board. May I get a motion from SAC committee members to approve the use of ESSER II and ESSER ARP funds as proposed in the Education and Fiscal Plan attached to Interim Superintendent Keith Hayashi's memorandum dated September 16th, 2021.
I'm sorry, Keely, this is Lila. Do we have a chance to ask any questions, or is that at a later time?
I believe once we are able to move on this, it'll be open for discussion afterwards.
Okay, I'm sorry. To learning the process. Thank you.
Okay. Would you like to move, Lila?
Sure. If that will encourage us to have some discussion, that would be great. Yes, I move. Exactly what you said to pass the
recommendation.
The recommendation, right?
Okay. And can I call upon Bill Arakaki, please?
I second the motion.
Okay. So the motion has been, from the SAC side, has been moved by Board Member Lila Berg and seconded by Bill Arakaki. Thank you. And so FIC Chair Voss, will you please proceed?
Thank you, Chair. Again, because this is a joint committee, we do need a motion and a second from the FIC committee members before we can enter into discussion and questions to the department. So from the FIC side, can I please get a motion to approve from a FIC committee member and a second? Looking for a hand. Board Member Fallon, Vice Chair, Committee Vice Chair Fallon.
I so move.
Okay. Looking for another, I saw your hand up, Chair Payne. Would you like to second?
Yes, I second the motion.
Thank you, Committee Vice Chair Fallon and Board Chair Payne. Chair Namau, the motion from the FIC side has been moved and seconded, and we are ready to enter into discussion as you deem appropriate. You're still on mute, Keely.
Kalamai, thank you for that. We are now going to open this up for discussion for our board members to be able to ask your questions. And I will try to honor each and every one of you as we go through this process. At our last board meeting, I was a little rushed at the very end, and I just kind of want to open it up a little bit here with some of my comments, or just a comment or so. And I'd like to give FIC Chair Bruce Voss the opportunity to speak as well with his comments before other board members weigh in with their particular questions. So I want to acknowledge the department for making best efforts to follow the guidelines that we had set out. And I'm very grateful that you folks have gone through more of a process. I do believe, and you have reached out to stakeholders to get their feedback, and that there's more of an educational plan that has been presented to us so that we can make a better decision on this recommendation today. So I just want to thank the department and everybody who has worked very, very hard on all of this. With that said, I do want to make a comment that there are going to be lots of monies that will be released if we vote on this to the CASs, as well as, and then down to the principals and the schools. Millions of dollars will be presented to them. And so with that said, I am a little concerned that the presentation that has been given to the board from the department does not give us enough specificity as to what kinds of programs and opportunities that the CASs will be offering to the schools. And I do have a concern about that, and I'd like to, I'm hoping that somehow during our discussion today, that this can be addressed. Because these are federal funds, they will be audited down the road, and we are responsible for those funds. All of us are responsible for those funds. The accountability needs to be there. And so I want people to keep that in mind as these funds are being presented to them. So those are just my comments that I want to just share in regards to that. And I'm hoping that at some point during this discussion today, that could be addressed. Chair Voss, do you have some other comments that you'd like to share?
I do, Chair Namau, and thank you for the opportunity, and we'll get to all members' questions in just a minute. My comments are going to somewhat echo Keely's, Superintendent. I am inclined to support and vote for this plan so we can get the additional more than $10 million to the complex areas to support the learning loss and student well-being programs for the rest of the fiscal year. Get this money to the schools to help students. And I appreciate, as Keely said, the work and effort that went into this. But I want to be clear. I consider this to be a work in progress at best. As the superintendent said, this is not a static final plan. This is at most a framework where changes can and must be made based on the data and the results. And to that point, I am concerned, similar to what Keely said about the expenditure report, which is dealt with only briefly on page 26 of the submittal. Part of this is transparency, but it goes to more than that. For this monthly report that the department is suggesting, I don't want to see just expenditures in broad categories like you have here in this framework. I want to see reports on specific programs that are being funded to the schools, what those programs at the schools are intended to achieve, and as those programs go on, whether they have had the projected and hoped for impact. So that this is not just a matter of accountability, because we will be audited, as Keely said, but also that this can be a resource of ideas and programs. The metrics that this plan proposes are fine, but to be candid, they're just the same metrics we've seen from the department over the last couple of years, and are not going to be an indicator of how effective any particular program is. So Superintendent, that's what I want to see in this monthly reporting to there. Can you please explain to me and the committee what the department envisions for the reporting on the accountability side of the expenditures and program effectiveness reports?
Interim Superintendent, how are you
Uh,
talking? I don't know if you're
No,
muted.
I'm sorry, during that, Fig Chair Voss, I'm sorry, during that last period, kind of went out. Well, can you please repeat the question?
Sure, I won't repeat everything I said, but
No,
I
no,
am
just the last portion. I
the-
didn't hear what the question was.
right.
I'm sorry.
My specific question is, you heard my concerns about how the plan needs to evolve and how we need to have detailed reporting on specific programs and specific program effectiveness. So please tell us what the department envisions for detailed financial reporting on specific programs and their impact and effectiveness on a regular and timely basis.
Thank you very much for the question. Our ESSER plan is created along creating sustainable systems within our schools. As I shared a little, it's basically formed on 4 strategies. Those 4 strategies include healthy habits, healthy schools, action-oriented decision-making, responsive capacity building, and effective academic practices. It's around those strategies that schools and complex areas will be determining based on data those systems that they need to put in place at schools. It was my understanding that we were looking together with the board, looking at incorporating systems within schools from which, within the system, within our ESSER program. And the systems within our program would then, at the school level, would be determining the programs that they would be using. So I just want to be sure that I understand correctly then that at that program level, the board, at the school level, the board is asking for feedback there. I'm just need to understand what the, I don't know if I fully understand what the ask is.
Well, yes, and maybe this is an obvious point, but I want to make it clear. I don't want these funds to just go out and then us not know how they were used or whether they were effective at the school levels. I assume that the department will have people, more than one person, regularly monitoring at the school level the particular programs that are being used, the funds that are being expended at the school level, and getting reports from those schools as to how much is being expended, on what, and whether they've been effective. And my point, Superintendent, is I want all of that in detail reported to the board on a regular basis. And I would like a commitment from you that that will happen.
Yes, each complex area will have personnel around those 4 strategies. And so area superintendents will be working together with their schools to identify the needs, the resources that are being utilized, and then how they're being utilized and the results of that. So it'll be through our complex areas and our area superintendents that will be able to gather data and information that we can report back on.
Thank you. I look forward to those reports in detail, I want to emphasize. And my last question before I yield back to Chair Namau is, if this board proceeds now under the premise that the schools need these monies, particularly for the accelerated learning and student well-being programs for next year, for which there is, by my count, at least $12 million, or arguably 15, depending on how it's allocated. I want to know from the department that there's not going to be any administrative issues, no delays, that this money is going to get into the school's hands beginning in January. For example, we heard in SAC about what I think is a terrific idea from the Nanakuli Waianae complex to hire 5 additional workers temporarily to provide, health aides, but also basically sort of like guidance, well-being people to get students back into schools. And I don't want to focus on that particular program, but it seems like a great use of these federal funds. Can you make us the commitment today here, Superintendent, that the funds that we approve today will start being used in the schools by next month?
Thank you for the question, I think Chair Voss. Should the plan be approved today, funds will be allocated down into the complex areas by next week.
Thank you, Superintendent. I yield, Chair.
Thank you.
Mahalo. I'd like to call on Board Member Lila Berg.
Thank you, Keely, and thank you, Keith, for your commitment. I'd like to build on what Bruce and Keely had asked about the programs. And since you said the money's going next week, at our next board meeting in January, would it be possible to give us some examples of how the schools are using the money? And I know that the plan I love the plan. The framework is very clear. I really appreciate, as Keely had mentioned, that people were involved. Now we need to know, okay, what's happening? Would we be able in January to hear from some specific schools?
Thank you for the question, Board Member Berg. Most definitely, we will be able to get schools that will be able to share with what they're doing with the ESSER funds.
Yeah, and we don't need a big show. We just need to know that Justin's school at Kaiser's doing this, and Mililani, and Hana and Manoa Elementary, because one of the concerns that I have or I guess interrogatives, it's a question, is this is not only programmatic, it's also financial for funding teachers. So can you explain a little bit more about the pay rates for the part-time teachers that was mentioned in there?
Yes, thank you very much for the question. I think what the concern was that the 21 hours of professional development for teachers, and while the department, we truly recognize the importance of that time, ESSER funds for payroll are subject to federal fringe. And also, though, in following the board guidance in fully leveraging the ESSER dollar to be able to support schools, we have already transmitted a request to Governor Ige to fully fund and reinstate the 21 hours for teachers. So that request has gone into the governor for funding, which would so that we would not need to use ESSER funds, which is subject to fringe. So that request has gone in already.
Okay, so that's great. I have one more question then too, or I guess request. when you are supervising also, and your assistant superintendents are supervising or evaluating the specific programs, can you include how how HA is integrated in all of those activities, or it forms the frame, or it is the outcome?
Yes, thank you for the, excuse me. Thank you for the question. Mahopeno are the beliefs and values that we embrace within the department, that we want not only for our students, but even for all of our educators. And so as teachers, it is not a individual lesson that is specifically only on Nahopeno Ao, but those values are incorporated within all of the lessons that we do. Teachers continuously reflect and help students to reflect on their behaviors and how they conduct themselves in class, how they treat others. And I think that's really important that we continue to do and to help have students reflect on. You know, when Waina High School shared about the challenges that they're experiencing with students coming back from the pandemic, and they also shared throughout, embedded within their presentation, I really believe was about how they embrace students and really know the student's story. And it's through that effort, which is Nahopeno Ao, right, that we all encompassing and working together in what we're doing, showing aloha for everyone, is really important. So that definitely is embedded within all of the activities that and learning that teachers share and students do.
I can appreciate that. And having been at the school level, I know that not 100% of the teachers actually integrate the values within their classrooms. And that's a work in progress. I guess what I'm asking you is to consider that the HA is also a framework and it is content. For instance, the concept of kuleana can be integrated in mathematics class as well as science class. Aloha Aina is not just a biology class or an environmental science. So I'm just asking to be a little bit, if you could be a little more critical when you're looking at, and the CASs as well, when they're looking at the programs, how do they integrate, how do they, not integrate, how do they demonstrate those values in action? Aloha is action. And particularly like in summer school. Is there a summer school program? And I know one of the things you said was health, social, emotional, and accelerated learning. What would the summer school programs look like, not just for remediation, but also for enhancement, enrichment? And if that's part of the, I would hope that that's part of the use of ESSER funds as well. So
yes,
just a request.
Yeah, most definitely. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Kili.
Board Member Bill Arakaki.
Thank you, Chair Namu, regarding the SAC. Just want to make some comments, and I have one question that is a follow-up. Thank you, Interim Superintendent Hayashi, and all the hard work and things that the department did, and the collaboration with the many stakeholders and the schools working with their SCC councils to provide input is a great effort. It's a lot of work for people to do, and during this time, and it was great to see all that information down there. Just wanted to comment that, this brings back memories regarding the 6 priority strategies that we had when Superintendent Matayoshi was there, with the 3 areas of focus, which was student success, staff success, and system success, where you have the areas of focus, which is the health and safety, social emotional learning, and the accelerated learning. And then you have the state system-wide strategies, which is healthy habits and healthy schools, action-oriented decision-making, responsive capacity building, and effective academic practices.
And, with some of the leaders and principals that are familiar with the system, this is something that they can relate to. And I know the new principals, how does this redefine their efforts in their schools? And my question is, Keith, is that, I know many board members are asking for detailed, specificity. And I just wanted to know, with this ESSER plan and, the feedback, monthly, that website, I know that schools or complexes have the complex area academic financial plan, and then the schools have the academic and financial plans also that really documents and provides the state DOE that information or specificity as far as what the actual enabling activities or things that they're actually doing with the different areas. So I just wanted to find out, and if that's true, that as we move forward, and this is a static, not static, but this is flexibility within the ESSER plan, that all the accountability and the specifics of what schools have to do in complexes is documented in their financial academic plans. And it's good to hear that the director for finance is saying that our economy has gotten better and that some of that monies that have been allocated on this plan can be adjusted to some of the needs that people had presented, as far as it's not really seen in a plan, that you're able to adjust it, and that'll really work out on that. But as far as the specifics and being able to report that back, our schools and complexes, is that the process that we still have as far as the plans for complex and schools?
Thank you very much for the question, Vice Chair Arkaki. Yes, that it is. At the school level, where students are and where decisions should be made based on the data that schools are getting, that students are getting as a result of the assessments, both formative and summative assessments that they're using. Those decisions are being made on how best to address those students' needs for their particular communities, as was shared in the Waianae High School's and Waianae Non-Included Complex's presentation earlier today. So, as an example, Waianae High School, looking at their data, have made deliberate decisions based on their data and to implement those systems within their schools, guided by the area superintendent. And that is true for all 15 complex areas. And based on what those decisions are and the strategies that those schools will be using, those decisions would be based at the complex and school level. At the state level, however, that would incorporate all of what we're doing, including the complex areas in schools, are those 4 statewide strategies. So when we look at healthy habits and healthy schools, for example, there is an office that an assistant superintendent that is taking lead on that area. And so for healthy habits, healthy schools, the office of student support and assistant superintendent Heidi Armstrong is taking lead on that area with the support from the other offices. Action-oriented data decision making is out of OSIP, Office of Strategy, Innovation, and Performance, with A.S. Tanimura. Responsive capacity building is with Office of Talent Management and Assistant Superintendent Sean Bacon. And effective academic practices is the lead on that is Office of Curriculum Instructional Design and Assistant Superintendent Terry Ushijima. So while each of the offices at a statewide level takes a lead, all of the area superintendents work together to help to support each of those areas. Hence, every complex area superintendent within their 15 complex areas also will be addressing those 4 areas. Each school will also be addressing those 4 areas. And so those are the consistent systems that we're putting across within the schools, the complex areas, and at the state that we'll be able to report to. Each school, however, may be doing different programs within their school to address their students' needs based on the data that they accumulate. So there is both a statewide evaluation and look at how we're doing, as well as area superintendents working with their schools on different areas based on their respective needs. So to answer your question, yes, both is very similar to those priorities, our 4 statewide strategies, and providing flexibility to the schools to be able to address their needs.
Thank you, Interim Superintendent Hayashi. The major and big task will be once this is approved and to gather the information so that you can report back to the board members regarding where we're at, and it's kind of a formative assessment where we're not doing it at the end of the year, but we're doing it throughout the year, each month, so that we can ensure that if something is not working at schools or the complex, that there is follow-up on that. So thank you for explaining that. And there is a system where we're getting there, and it's a start. Yeah, and thank you so much for answering that question.
Thank you.
Chair Payne.
Thank you. And thank you for this report, Keith. My question, I'm not sure if it goes to you or to Craig Hirai from the State Budget Office, because it's a little bit more just getting some clarity, because I did hear you say that we are anticipating that big cut of $100 million coming back into the department. So my question is, with respect to the stabilization items that are totaling about 142 million, and really a lot of them are filling the gaps where those areas were cut with respect to offices and other critical programs. Does that mean that if the state gives us back those resources that were cut, that the ESSER funds could be used in other ways to be more specifically impactful to schools?
Director Hirai or also Assistant Superintendent Hallett. Yes, Hallett, would you like to take the first response to that, and then Director Hirai?
Are we on? Let's start video.
Sure, this is Assistant Superintendent Brian Hallett. The expenditure plan is laid out in the materials today, already factors in the assumption of the restoration of funding, general funds for our shortfalls over the next couple of fiscal years. I believe that the presentation from Finance Director just gives us confidence that that is a fair or reasonable assumption to make at this time. But I defer to Craig if he has anything to add to that, to the Finance Director.
As some of you know, I'm sure one of the side effects of ESSER II and ESSER ARP is this maintenance of effort thing that requires the state's expenditures for DOE and UH maintain their proportionality with respect to the budget as a whole. And so as we restore non-educational budgets across the state, we have to restore DOE and UH budgets proportionately. So if that gives you, I mean, that's one of the reasons why you should have some confidence that so long as the economy keeps up and the revenues keep up, that, this will be sustained in particular in FY23, but going forward too in our financial plan.
Thank you for that. That does help to clear things up, because I was thinking when I heard that maybe we would be able to repurpose some of these ESSER funds. The other piece that I do believe you've answered, and I appreciate the answer, but I just want to emphasize the restoration of the 21 hours that you have already asked the governor for, Superintendent Hayashi, because that I do believe is a critical piece to having us really be able to implement some of the innovations and some of the things that we aspire to have in our system. And so I am heartened by your comment that you've made that request to the governor, because I do believe it's very important.
Thank you, Chair Payne. Yes, we did make the request to the governor already.
Okay, thank you, and I yield.
Thank you.
Board Vice Chair Kenneth Uemura.
Thank you, Chair Namu. I appreciative of the response from Greg Hurai to Chair Payne's question, because I was a little confused myself, but I think I understand that, so I can sort of repurpose my questioning. But I do want to say that I do agree with Chairs Namu and Chair Voss on their concerns, and I wanted to just expand that just a little bit and talk about a little bit about numbers, because what I was concerned about was that on the $412.5 million that we got, $83.3 million, or 20%, was used to offset some of the $100.2 million cuts in the current fiscal year. And so that's where I think Chair Payne's question was very relevant, because I thought when Director Hirai had mentioned that it was, we could repurpose those funds, but the answer is really no, you can't, because that's already been used to fill the gaps to the total of $83.3 million. The question that really comes about is some of these offsets really needed to be offset, and I think there was a previous discussion in the FIC meeting, and I don't want to rehash that. But also there is about $169.2 million, or 41% of the complex area proposals and system-wide strategic support that is really not documented. And we talked about being transparent, but I think based on what Keith had mentioned, there are things moving that's for the use of the money. And Member Berg's question about funding raises a question for me as well, because if the money can be funded the next week, that this $169 million, basically you have uses for it already if you're going to fund it next week. Maybe not the whole total 169, but at least for the fiscal year 21 to 22. So, that's a question for me. I think that was a question that Chair Namu had, is basically there's a lot of money going down to the complex area and a system-wide to spend, and us not knowing how much detail they're going to use it for. But I think Chair Voss's question about, look, we need to know how they're going to be used, when they're going to be used, and what is the expected outcome of those uses, and you report back to the board. But the question that I think the board needs to ask is, do we want to do that pre or post, right? Do we want to get into the details of how to spend the money? And I think from my perspective, if we want to stay in our lanes as the board members, we need to give Keith and his people the flexibility to spend the money. However, having said that, they need to give us more detail. They don't have to give us every program, but they need to at least give us into better subtopics, so at least we know what's happening there. And the superintendent's contingency fund of $10.7 million. I'm in my total career, I was never a fan of contingency funds, because I feel that every dollar should be accounted for. And if there's money that needs to be allocated, they can come to the board for that. But the superintendent, $10.7 million, that's 2.6%. And so, there's a line that the board needs to take a look at that. But I just wanted to bring that out to the board, that the concerns that was raised is valid concerns. And really the question should be, because we really want to support the schools, I was encouraged to hear that the funds can be expended. And I think we're talking about the current fiscal years, and one of the testifiers said, we're already 6 months into the current fiscal year, so money needs to be spent. But I think maybe the board's focus should be maybe on the current fiscal year, 21, 22, and then have the superintendent come back with the future years, the more detail that we need. So I'm not asking for a comment, Keith. I'm just wanted to just comment to the board. And so chairs, I'm going to yield the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts, Vice Chair Uemura. The $53 million complex area superintendents I have been working closely together with Deputy Unibasami on complex area plans to expend those funds. So each complex area superintendent has been working closely with their schools. And just to share also that the $10 million request for the contingency fund for the superintendent, definitely we will be reporting back to the board as those funds are expended on what it was expended on. So thank you very much for the question.
Board Vice Chair Kenneth, are you yielding?
Yes.
Okay, I'm calling upon Board Member Lynn Fallon.
Thank you, Chair Namau and Voss. I guess this question is for the superintendent, and then he can decide on who might also want to add to the response. So first of all, kudos on focus on systems development. Because we did ask for that focus and how it impacts students directly. And as a board member, I want to be sure we stay in our lane and we're consistent in terms of what we ask. So I'm going to build on kind of that foundational piece and just query you about your thoughts about several things related to what is being presented today. I thought Chair Namau and Voss and Vice Chair Uemura and their thoughts were right on task in terms of information needed. But within the context of our role, I think that the school's focus should continue to be on the programs and really sound decision-making about what programs work best based on their experience and the data. So having said that, as a board member, kind of looking at the systems and the various roles and the tools and strategies that the schools need and the role of the complex and state in supporting schools in the development of the systems, I have some specific questions. In your description on page 12, you begin to clarify, at least within the context of this presentation and the ESSER funds, the role of the state offices. And what is missing for me, because it came up in the presentation previously in the SAC meeting, has to do with the state's role in supporting schools and providing data and analyzing the data. So I want to know because that wasn't present in the description, what is the state's role in that area? And then secondly, or because you didn't add that in, is it the CAS's responsibility to provide the data and analyze it? And if it's both, kind of what's the tension between the two? So that's one specific question. The other point I want to make is that related to the quarterly reporting that you said you would be posting. I think that should be also a part of the regular report back to the board in terms of the expenditure of ESSER. And I'd like to see it linked, those metrics, linked to those 4 buckets you mentioned, healthy communities, so that at least on a systems-wide perspective, not necessarily programmatic perspective, we kind of know what the relationship is. And what was missing for me in that socio-emotional area is the behavioral data. Because in the previous presentation, they listed, which I thought was very important to the schools, had to do with, what was it? It had to do with, I think, the number of kids acting out. I'm sorry, I don't remember the exact terminology, but I think if you go back to that presentation, so there's what missing. And then finally, please comment on why there are a variety of, I think Hayes' presentation talked about targets and goals, but I had asked that question previously about what does success look like. I would like to see some targets and goals established so that as a board and as a system, we can celebrate successes and we know exactly what progress is made toward reaching that goal. And that would be really important in the quarterly reports. Thank you. I yield and wait your response.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair Fallon. We'll start with your last question related to the targets and goals. So I'm going to ask Assistant Superintendent Kara Tanimura to respond to that question first. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. This is Kara Tanimura, Interim Assistant Superintendent for the Office of Strategy, Innovation, and Performance. And to address your question, Board Member Fallon, the targets and goals are really most appropriate in a strategic plan. What we are using for our target and goal is still the summative data, which is like the Smarter Balanced, as well as all of the Strive High for federal and state accountability. The ESSER plan is not meant to be a statewide strategic plan. And then I can address the issue about the state support. We, our office, OSIP, we organize and facilitate complex area representative meetings quarterly, and we go over all of the data from each of the complex areas with their representatives to ensure accuracy. And that is something that we'll be posting. In fact, our first dashboard for the 17 metrics for ESSER will be posted tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, AS Tanimura. As far as the complex area superintendents, the area superintendents also do monitor data at their respective levels and their schools and have regular discussions with school principals to identify trends and areas that may need to be addressed to strengthen systems within the schools and within the complex areas.
Thank you. I just a follow-up question. So in the quarterly report, well, whatever the regularity is of your report on the effectiveness and the expenditures, you're going to be using the formative assessments, is that my understanding, and link it back to the specific 4 areas? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Yes, we'll be using the formative assessment, connecting it back to the 4 statewide strategies.
Okay. And the second piece had to do with the targets. So if you are using, you're using the formative assessment targets, have you established targets for those areas? In other words, it's like, okay, we're going to aim and we need to know what we're aiming at. And so if you're using the formative assessments, do you agree, or what are your thoughts about targets?
We're right now looking at the metrics and identifying those metrics on how we're going to get there to address those need areas within our ESSER plan. As A.S. Tanimura had shared, we have not identified targets for our ESSER plan, as it is not our strategic plan. That it is not our strategic plan, our ESSER plan. The two different plans. Yeah.
So if you look at your ESSER plan, and so maybe I don't understand what you're explaining. So if you look at the ESSER plan and you look at the formative assessment data, are you looking at, and you report the progress made on the formative assessment data, how will you know if schools are making enough progress? What are you going to gauge that? An average? What exactly?
Right now, the area superintendents we monitoring gain and progress. We have not identified targets or a particular destination where students need to meet, but we are definitely monitoring their progress in terms of improvement in those areas. Yes, Tanimura, do you want to share anything else on that?
Yes, I just wanted to clarify. I apologize for the confusion, but just going back to again to the purpose of the metrics and the formative assessments, it isn't to set those targets, but it is to inform our school leaders and complex areas as well as state office of student progress and growth. So it is just going along the way and not a summative accountability type of data or for the use of summative purposes. It is for formative purposes.
So I'm sorry, but I just want to be sure that after the money is expended, that we know what the impact is on students. And so how will the department be able to determine effectiveness then, in terms of your report back to our role, and I guess at some point to the feds?
Well, the department is definitely looking at as schools improve within their areas. We have not set summative targets for these areas, but looking at how we're improving in them. That's where we are now.
Okay. I think you understand what my concern is and kind of what my interest is around being able to not only continuously improve, but there's so much good going on to actually celebrate those kinds of targets met, or be really clear about kind of our goals, so to speak. So I yield at this point. Thank you.
May I ask also if Deputy Superintendent Onibasami would like to share too, please? If I can ask her to share. Board staff, if you could please activate her.
Aloha. Thank you for the question. It's an important one, board member Fallon. First of all, as Assistant Superintendent Tanimura stated, the Strive-I data metrics are very important, and those are the targets that have been set and approved by the Board of Education. We still have that as an important set of measures that we are using across all of our schools and throughout the Department of Education. And so we did not want to set a new set of targets and have a conversation saying now, so are we not using the Strive-I data and those measures? The answer is we absolutely are using them. When we move to the looking at the metrics that are in the ed plan, what we're looking for, as you recall, one of the strategies is action-oriented data decision making. And when those 17 metrics were were decided upon. It was what were universal metrics that all schools would need at their fingertips, or at least frequently enough that they could make decisions on behalf of their school and their school community um, that they would find useful and valuable, right? So when you take a look at those 17 metrics, what I would like to suggest is that while they may not have a quote target or an aim, for us it's really, are we progressing, and is there anything else that we can do using the money, using the assets that we have in the department to better serve our students? And I'll just go point out a couple of them for you. And it was really to put information in the hands, make it accessible to people who are making decisions. So if you look at on page 18, we talk about vaccinations, right? Total number of staff who have received COVID-19 vaccinations. We don't have a target for it, but what our target was in this effort was to make it accessible as possible for our teachers, for our custodians, for our front office staff, for our leaders to be able to get the vaccination. However, we know we're not going to make the 100%, because some of them will be asking for, and rightfully so, medical and or religious reasons, and asking for an exemption. So it's not appropriate to set a target there, but the question we have is, as we watch the vaccination rates, have we done everything we can in helping our employees get the vaccination? Should they want that? As we look forward, as we look into the social emotional learning, the Strive High target is chronic absenteeism, reducing chronic absenteeism. So if you look at the inquiry questions, what we're looking at is giving our schools and leaders data about daily attendance and who are the students that are becoming at risk for chronically absent. So it's almost creating this journey and giving them data that helps them to identify of the people making decisions.
I think, board staff, I think, we don't have Deputy Onibasami connected. I'm just, can you hear me? Okay, just one second, please. We have our tech staff here checking deputies.
I just unmuted.
Superintendent, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
You know,
We're-
maybe, I see that there may be other board members with questions, so maybe we can take this one offline and continue the discussion. I hate to not enable my fellow board members to respond or ask additional questions.
Think about that. I'm not sure. Can you hear me?
No, I can. Yeah, I can try now.
Okay. Oh,
Okay, yeah. Member Fallen, if Vice Chair Fallen, if we may, and Chair
That's
Now,
fine.
if it's possible, if we can perhaps, we're still experiencing difficulty hearing Deputy Ulimasami. You want to try one more time, Deputy?
I am unmuted, so.
Yeah.
Can I-
Okay, I think, well, sorry, Vice Chair Fawley, and Chair Naumu, if it's possible for us to move on to the next board member?
Yes.
And yeah,
I'll
thank you.
do that because we did hear her slightly, but it disengaged again. So I'll continue with other board members' questions. Board Member Bruce Foss.
Thank you, Chair. Ken's comments about sort of the micro and macro issues raised a really important issue on follow-up because, we want this money to get to schools, particularly for the CAS projects. We want detailed and prompt reporting on that. But presumably, the department, as Ken suggested, will be taking all that data, all that information, and then modifying the plan and probably reallocating some of the expenditure categories. So my question, Superintendent, is when will that happen? For example, at the end of the legislative session or at the end of the fiscal year on June 30th? When does the department anticipating coming back to us with a modified ESSER funds plan based on the data and input received?
Thank you for the question, Big Chair Ross. We were looking at coming back, I believe, in March or July to the board to share updates on expenditures. So perhaps we can do it at that time.
Okay. I think that would be useful, to come back in March and then potentially with a reallocation of funds as appropriate in July. And before I yield, Chair, I do want to thank the Governor and Budget Director Harai for the appropriation requests that they've made in their supplemental budget requests. I mean, that's really critical. This only works for the students. These funds are going to be able to help the students in these amounts thanks to that request and if the legislature in fact honors it. So thank you to the Governor and Director Harai for that. I yield, Chair.
Mahalo. I'd like to call on Student Representative Kayla Musso, please. She's having some difficulty with her getting my attention with her hand, but my understanding is that she would like to share some of her mana'o. Kayla?
Thank you, Chair Nama'u. I just wanted to provide some background as to how student voice and perspective was incorporated within this plan. And as previously mentioned by Superintendent Hayashi, the DOE's Office of Strategy, Innovation, and Performance reached out to the Hawaii State Student Council during our November meeting. And the Hawaii State Student Council, for those who don't know, is an organization made up of 1 to 2 student representatives from each public high school in Hawaii, where I also attend to give my monthly BOE reports to our student reps. And OSIP reached out to gather their feedback specifically on how to improve the 3 areas of focus, which are the health and safety, accelerated learning, and social emotional learning by using the ESSER funds. And some of the recommendations that were made during our meeting can be found within the stakeholder feedback at the bottom of the page. Some things were addressed, such as understaffed health rooms and accessible tutoring. And then with HSSC being one of the few student stakeholder groups spoken to from the meeting with OSIP, the members of the Hawaii State Student Council were well in support of the educational plan being approved so that the ESSER funds could be used to aid our public schools and implement these important services. And so I just wanted to provide some commentary on that. And we thank the DOE again for reaching out to HSSC to develop their plan.
Mahalo,
Thank you very
Kayla,
much.
for your input. I'm going to call on Board Member Kaimana Bakarsi. Kaimana, I don't know if you've unmuted yourself here. Kaimana, I'm going to get back to you. In the meantime, I'm going to call back Board Vice Chair Kenneth Urimura.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a general question I think that would help clarify some of Board Member Fallon's questions. So I'd like to direct my comment question to Kara Tanimura, if I may. So Kara, from what I understand, and I guess one of my questions that I had initially was, we talked about the ESSER education and plans, and one of my questions was, is the plans solely in support of the ESSER funds? And I think based on your answer, the answer is yes. And so the question that I have, though my assumption is correct, is that does the department have a base education plan that supports the BOE priorities? And I think, the answer really is in your strategic plan, which you don't have one at this point, right? So I think, when we use ESSER funds, I, for one, would like to know how the ESSER plan fits in with a total education plan. And that's where I think the questions come about is, how do we see the results? What are outcomes? Absenteeism, college graduation rates. That's all part of our initial strategic plan that lapsed back in 2020. But when we look at ESSER funds and we're using the money to support a different education plan, so the question is, how does the ESSER education plan fit into the total overall department education plan?
Thank you, Vice Chair Umura. I can respond to that. This is Kara Tanimura. So because we don't have a strategic plan at this point in time, right? The department does use the Strive High as our summative look at how we did over the school year. Really, like Deputy was explaining earlier before her computer died, is that the 17 metrics are meant for formative use, and it is to guide us. It is baseline data to see how we're going to grow and achieve and make sure that students are progressing. Does that make sense?
No, it makes a lot of sense. I think just the issue that we have is trying to put the two together and how it fits into the total education plan, which we don't have one. And then we're being asked to approve up to $412 million to support an ESSER education fund, which doesn't have goals and accomplishments. So, that's where I think I'm having a hard time with. I'm not against the funding. I just want to know what the outcomes will be when we fund some of these programs. If we have no direction, or as Board Member Fallon said, we need a target. What are we aiming for? And are we falling short of the target? Are we exceeding it? Are we meeting the target? And so when we start putting money like that, I get a little concerned. And so I just wanted to make sure I put it out there and get that question clarified, that, as you said, we are looking at two separate plans. But my question is, where's the master plan?
So again, just to clarify, right, the ESSER plan does provide us with baseline data in which we're going to use to measure progress and growth. A lot of the metrics, like for example, the attendance, the graduation, the grades, the universal screener data, I mean, we're using the same data metrics to ensure consistency and to provide state leadership and at the state level for our schools and complex areas. So we have teams that we work with at the complex area to go over the data. And so I hope that that helps clarify the question.
Yeah, it does, but it doesn't answer the question. So, I don't want to, take up the time of the other board members. I see a member of Fallon is on there. So I'm going to yield my time, Chair.
Uh,
And thank you, Carol.
Vice Chair Uemura, if I may, this is Keith
Sure.
Hayashi. Hi. Actually, technically, we are still operating under the 20, what you had mentioned, the 2020 strategic plan and targets, of which we're looking at Strive High. So those are, as of right now, the Strive High targets that we're operating under and addressing.
Okay, so again, you don't have a strategic plan that's been approved by the board. So
No.
I understand that you don't have a direction, so you have to follow something, right?
Right. So we're currently following the last board approved plan, which was the 2017 to 2020 strategic plan and those targets.
Yeah. So what are some of the, do you have some of the Strive High targets on the top of your head that we can be looking at? Because it's not included in your matrix, right?
Yes. If I remember correctly, I think we were looking at things like chronic absenteeism,
Right.
chronic absenteeism. I know it was college going rates.
Yeah. Graduation rates. Yeah.
Graduation rates, high school graduation. I remember that as a high school principal. Definitely, we're looking at student achievement. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ninth grade on
Achievement
track.
gap, yeah.
I believe it was ninth grade on track, looking at our freshmen coming in, and third grade literacy was one. I think college going. I think CTE. I think CTE concentrators was another. So those are some of the inclusion was another one. Inclusion targets, or things that come to mind. And as we're looking at it, I know what I'm thinking about it now. Teacher retention was also something that we're looking at. R&M backlog was another one. So those are things that we're continuing to focus on as we work towards a strategic plan.
Yeah, and I think, and thank you, Keith, and I apologize for putting you on the spot. I think we can all find the targets because we all have it someplace, right? And some of the targets we look at, what I'm trying to get at is, if we're going to spend this money, we have to make sure that the money is going toward achieving some of those targets, like the absenteeism, graduation rate. And you kind of touched on that, but you don't list it. So, there's no targets for us to then say, what, the money spent is well spent. And it goes back to, Chair, Big Chair Bruce's comments about, we can give you the money, but tell us how you got to report back how it's been used. And then going back to Member Fallon's thing is, what are our targets? What are we aiming for? And so I think where the disconnect for me is there's a lot of data, and we talk on matrix and all of these things where the money is going, but we don't have that thing that puts it together and tell us we're going to give you $412 million, but this is what we're going to get back. Because at the last meeting, we talked about achievement gap. We talk about when do you think the accelerated learning, when are we going to get back to that? And I think I asked you that question, and I said, is it going to take us 2 years? Because I think you felt that we were like kind of 2 years behind. Is it going to take us 2 years to even get back to where we were? And then the question was then, okay, so how long do we need to get to meet our goals? And that wasn't answered. So, those kind of things, from a board perspective, I like to see. So when you look at this data, we can all wrap our minds around how we're doing, because to be honest, Keith, you take care of the schools, education side, you determine how you're going to meet the goals. And the board the board then asks, this is what we want, Keith. If we say, Keith, we want 100% graduation rate, tell us how you're going to do it. Things like that. I know you already said 100% is difficult, and I agree with you, but schools have done it. So, but that's just an example. It's not what the board is asking, obviously. It's just an example that I'm bringing up. So
Thank you.
Go ahead.
100% definitely is difficult, but it's definitely we are 100% committed to achieving 100%.
Yes, I agree. I agree. Shoot for the stars, right? So Chair Naamo, I see you smiling, so I'm going to yield my time. Thank you, Keith.
Thank you. Thank you, Vice Chair.
I'm going to call on Lynn Fallon.
Thank you, Chair. So this was a really good discussion. Thank you. And I hope that in my role, at least as a board member, that Superintendent Hayashi, you see this as productive. I understand that you have many challenges on your time, so I really appreciate your openness to have this discussion, both you and your staff. Building on kind of the discussion we've been having around targets, targets for some people are very uncomfortable because if you don't reach it, it's failure. But I think it's important for us to think about this area because otherwise it's difficult to know what progress is being made. So whether it's using a national target or a statewide average or some other kind of target, I think it's important in the long run as part of the system you're building. So that's I just wanted to assure you that at least for me, a target isn't, I don't see it as a negative thing. I also, and when you don't reach the target, as long as, a good faith effort is made and you can provide the information behind it. I think the other part is related to Strive High. I understand that there are metrics for Strive High, but since we're talking about targets, are there targets for Strive High, actual targets? Thank you, I yield.
Thank you for the question, Vice Chair Fallon. Yes, there are statewide targets for Strive High. Based on the 2017, 2020 targets. For example, the chronic absenteeism 2020 target was 9%. And that's based off of the 2017 to 2020 strategic plan. So we can get that to the board members.
Thank you very much. I yield.
Thank you.
Has Kaimana Bakarsi been able to log back on? And does Kaimana want to share some mana'o? I think we've lost Kaimana entirely here. Kalamai Kaimana. Are there other members from the board that would like to share anything, further comments? I'll try to scroll through here and see. Okay. I think yeah, Kaimana is still having issues. I think I just want to sum it up with a couple of my comments from listening to my fellow board members here. We're not, Interim Superintendent Keith Hayashi, we're not here to micromanage anything. We have full faith in the department, the CASs, and the principals as knowing what kinds of programs that they would like to do and what is needed for their students. But I believe what we do want to hear is when I'm talking about the programs and when I talk about specificity of those programs, we want to know the kinds of programs that you are intending to implement. And as you report out, and as Chair Bruce Voss had shared, we really want to see those reports, and we would like to see them, if you can, almost monthly, so we can see that there's some kind of progress. We'd like to see the types of programs that are going to be presented. And we would like to see eventually some results from those programs. And I think everyone's having a hard time because we're avoiding the idea of a target, and it not to be used in a negative way at all, but we have to have an understanding of what are we going for. I mean, if schools are going to be implementing a particular program at their school, we want to see that it's going to have a positive effect on those students. We want to see that this is working out. And if we're going to be looking at if we are going to be reassessing our fiscal responsibility in March and in July, for example, we're going to need to have those kinds of results. Those kinds of things have to be shared with us. And we have to understand that we are making some headway here. When I look at the 17 metrics, for example, and I'm just picking this additional student support at the end here, and you're talking about after-school programs and summer learning programs. I mean, the metrics that you're measuring is the student participation for after-school programs that are offered, like, I guess maybe the amount of students that will be participating in after-school programs. That's a metric. But it doesn't tell me if the after-school program has made an effect on the student. That's really what I want to know. I want to understand that did that particular after-school program or the types of after-school programs that we're providing for students, is it having an effect on their learning? I want to know that. I want to know if summer learning is going to have an effect on our students. I want to know that. And we're releasing funds to you, and some of it is summer learning, and we're giving you a lot more funding than what is required from the US DOE. It's only supposed to be 1%, and I believe we're giving you maybe up to 15%. I could be wrong on that. I saw that somewhere in my readings. But the schools are going in the springtime. They're going to be putting together their plans for summer school programming. And I can tell you, I was greatly disappointed when I did a temperature check of schools this past spring. What do you have for summer school programming? What are your intentions for these kids who at that point were strictly doing distance learning? And the result and the answers that I got were, we're doing credit recovery and remediation. Well, I'm sorry, as a child, as a student who has been in front of a computer for days on end, that's not exciting to me. So I'm not surprised that you're saying that enrollment for summer school has gone down. I'm not interested in going to summer school if you're going to offer that to me. The US DOE said specifically in their reporting for best practices for summer learning this past summer was that they're giving us this money to be innovative and to try new things out. And that's what my hope is for ESSER funding, to be applied for this summer school program. And please, CASs, you have control of this. CASs out there who may be listening, I'm asking you, ask your principals, what can they do for their students? What kinds of programs can we offer that will enhance and want them to come to school and learn? So please keep that in mind as you are doling out these monies and supporting these schools. Ask the question, are we helping the students, and are they going to learn? And can we document that? Can we be accountable for this learning? I want to see that. I want to see innovative, fun, academic, supportive programming out there. We're charging you with that. We are asking you to be courageous. Don't do the same old things. If we're seeing that, especially our students that are most negatively impacted, our Native Hawaiians, our Pacific Islander students, our disadvantaged economic students, if they weren't doing good before the pandemic and you're still applying the same kinds of protocols, I don't think that's going to be forward thinking, and I don't think we're going to make a difference. But here you have an opportunity. You have a tremendous amount of opportunity to make a difference. You have the monies now to really make the difference. So I'm asking that you do make that difference by thinking out of the box. And I'm not saying that all of you are going to be successful at it, but at least you've tried. I want you to give it the old college try. That you tried something new. You targeted a specific group. We're looking at those kinds of targets. Are there improvements? Are the kids, social emotional learning? Are they coming back to school enthusiastic about learning and they feel good about themselves and they, Strive High data is part of it, but there's so much. There's so much that I think we can figure out. And I'm just asking you to figure out some kinds of goals, some kinds of targets that can show us, the board, that this money is making a difference on our students. Please focus back on the students. Is it making a difference to their education, to their learning? And I'm hoping that with these ideas in mind, that you address that when you come to us in March, for example, and we're going to look at and reevaluate like what is working and what is not working and what is, we don't know yet, but we think we're on the right track. We have to have some kind of idea. And if it works, let's put more money towards it. Let's allocate more funds towards that. But right now, like I said at the beginning of this discussion, this is you're getting there, and I appreciate all the work that's been put into it, and it's a good start. And I believe that we all want the schools to have these funds, but we want this to be used. And we're not trying to do micromanage. Please understand, we're not here to micromanage, but we just want to be sure and assured and transparency and accountability and visibility are all these things that need to be shared with all of us, so that you share with us, you share with the public, you share with your employees, your plans, for these ESSER funds. So I think I heard from everyone, and I understand that Kaimana might be back. And Kaimana, would you like to share some mana'o before we carry on?
Chair Naumo, if I may, if I may share a
Sure.
little. Thank you very much for your sharing. Definitely, the decisions that we make at the department, and the complex areas and the schools, always put students first. And so I can reassure you that those decisions are being made thinking always about our students. In terms of the summer, was able to take a look at some of the data, or looking at our data. And in 2020, our summer enrollment was at 20,719 students. Last year, we went up to 26,297 students in 229 schools offered summer programming. So our enrollment numbers were up last year, and I think that is thanks to the efforts of our school administrators and our teachers that work to provide those different kinds of opportunities for our students in summer learning, which would include also credit recovery, because we want to be sure, especially for those students who may not have met graduation requirements, that they do have an opportunity during the summer to qualify for postgraduate opportunities, so that they can get their diploma. We definitely look forward to making a difference. I think when we're looking at the metrics and reporting back, my recommendation would be, I know the ask was monthly, but I think no more than quarterly would be the recommendation, because as the board had shared earlier, we want to be sure that the schools are allowed opportunities to provide the supports that they need for those students. And what I don't want to happen is to have school personnel being tied up, having to report back monthly. But we can definitely, I think, report back quarterly to the board, because those numbers would need to be aggregated from the school level. And so to lessen any burden on the school, although those that data is important, to report back to the board, my recommendation would be no more than quarterly for that reporting. Definitely, let's see. What we are implementing is support on our students, the quarterly metrics. Also, I think we can also share back universal screener data to address academic and social emotional gains for our students, and which would then also reflect the hard work that's going on at our schools. We're confident that our schools can do this, and having the plan approved definitely will provide the opportunities for our students our schools to be able to access those funds to address the needs that you've raised. So thank you very much for the opportunity to respond.
Mahalo. Kaimana, do you have some words to share?
Aloha nui mai, Chair Nama'u, Board Member Kaimana Bakarsa here. I'll defer given the interest of time, and we have a robust meeting coming up here shortly, but just wanted to reiterate what my fellow board members have shared, and appreciate the commitments that have been made for deep and strong communication, and we will be definitely holding to that. And it's not necessarily the amount of the communication we get, but really the quality. Whether it's a monthly or quarterly, we get good data and the data that we're asking for, and it coincides with what we're hearing from the ground. That's what we really want to hear. So mahalo, and I yield.
Thank you. And FIC Chair, I want to give you an opportunity if you have any parting words.
No, I am good, and I appreciate your message, Chair Nama'u. Just one thing on the reporting, and I want to make this distinction so we're not mixing apples and oranges. I do not want to burden the schools, but I do not think it is an unreasonable ask to have the department report on at least the expenditures, what the program is, and what was the amount that was given to the schools on a monthly basis. That's something the department should be tracking. However, I do agree with the superintendent that I don't want to unnecessarily burden schools. So as to the impact, which you were getting at, Keely, is this actually working? I would be fine with that being reported on a quarterly basis, but what's actually being spent, in my view, there's no reason why that can't and shouldn't be reported on a monthly basis. I yield, and we can proceed to the vote.
Thank you for that clarification. And I don't think it is unreasonable, reporting out to us on a monthly basis with the fiscal appropriations would be very helpful. And then having to give us a fuller report on the quarterly basis would be ideal. So mahalo. So if there is no further discussion, I believe we are ready to vote on the motion, and I will now be taking a roll call vote from the Student Achievement Committee members. SAC members, wait until I call on you to unmute your microphone. I'll start with SAC Vice Chairperson Vil Arakaki.
Aye.
I don't believe committee member Shanti Asher has not been with us. I will move on to committee member Kaimana Bakarsi.
Aye.
SAC committee member Lila Berg.
Aye, and thank you for the discussion.
SAC committee member Lynn Fallon.
Aye.
SAC committee member Catherine Payne.
Aye.
SAC committee member Ken Uemura.
Chair, just a point of order. Is the motion to approve the total 412 million or just fiscal year 21-22 of 201 million?
I believe that it's for the entire amount.
Okay. I will then vote aye.
Okay, thank you. So Finance and Infrastructure Committee Chairperson Bruce Foss will now take a roll call vote for the Finance and Infrastructure Committee members.
Thank you, Chair. And before we vote, I do want to thank you, Chair Nama'u, for your leadership on these issues. This plan that we're voting on today is much improved from what was originally submitted to the board for consideration. And as to Vice Chair Uemura's comment, and I appreciate his aye vote, we are voting on the entire plan here as presented to us, but based on the express representation by the department that it will be reviewed and as appropriate modified and presented to the board for further approval as needed based on the use and impact of the funds. With that, we will now move to the votes by the FIC Committee. FIC Vice Chair Lynn Fallon.
Aye.
FIC Committee Member Bill Arakaki.
Aye.
FIC Committee Member and Chairperson Kili Nama'u.
Aye.
Board Chair and FIC Committee Member Catherine Payne.
Aye.
Thank you all. Chair Nama'u, it has been approved by the FIC Committee as well. I yield.
So the motion has been approved. And as our final order of business, we will give members of the public who missed their opportunity to testify earlier on agenda items to testify now, including those who signed up but were not in attendance, had technical difficulties, or signed up late. Do we have any testifiers who have signed up to provide oral testimony on this agenda item?
Linda Elento. Linda, can you hear me? Committee Chairs Nama'u and Voss. Linda Elento is not connected nor present. This concludes oral testimony.
Mahalo, Gina. Since there is no more public testimony or further business on the agenda, this meeting is adjourned as of 1:21 p.m. Mahalo.
To all board members